That's the most exciting bit of the presentation. Joking. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. Thank you very much for finding the room. It was a bit of a challenge. My name's Neil Wallace, aka Kyoko Hunter. I'll just give you a little bit of info about myself before going into the presentation. So I've been to Japan 8 times, so I'm kind of obsessed. The first time I went was in 2008 on a tour. The second time I went, I bumped into this lovely lady here. Didn't know her beforehand. Second time we were in a relationship, got engaged on the 5th trip and had our honeymoon on the 6th. So crazy things can happen if you go to Japan. So this is going to be a bit more of an informative presentation. If there's anything that is actually funny, it's not planned. It all just happens. So let's crack on. So the first point I want to make out is that if you're planning a trip to Japan, you need to plan. And basically, this is what I'm here to help you with today, to understand all the different things you might want to consider when you're planning to go out into Japan, and some useful things to know when you're out in Japan. I am just an amateur rather than a travel expert. So it's always best when you're planning to double check before you go. It's just kind of like a bit of a signposting exercise. So we're going to start off right at the beginning when you've got that little inkling of wanting to go out to Japan in your mind. So the first thing you're going to want to think about is when you want to travel to Japan. Like Britain and the good old British weather, there are good times and there are bad times, but in Japan it's a bit more predictable than we have. So I've put together this natty little chart using data from Japan Guide. It is an average, so it will depend on where you are in the country. But I would recommend the best time of year is to go around about March, April time, where it's kind of a similar temperature to the UK, when we do actually have some slightly warmer weather. Not too much chance of rain. Another good time of year is actually towards the end, around about October, kind of early November time. Again, pretty similar temperature to the average summer in the UK, not too much rain. I'd probably avoid around about July, June, because you have a combination of heavy rain more towards June. And then when you get into July, it's really hot, really humid. So let's look at the good bits of it. So this is Nara, where the deer roam freely and free to headbutt people and that kind of thing. But as you can see, it's a great time of year to go out to see the cherry blossom. It does kind of work its way through the country. So check if you're planning to go out then, kind of where it's going to be roughly. And as you can see, this is kind of mid-October. Looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Wish our Octobers looked like that. So times of the year you probably want to avoid because it's busy rather than because of the weather. New Year's, big public holiday in Japan, lots of people traveling, lots of hotels booked. It'll be a fantastic experience, but be prepared for the pain of it. You've got the spring holidays, a bit like we have the spring holidays, and then Golden Week towards the end of April. So probably best to kind of stay to the March, early April, because it's not so bad when it gets into Golden Week, another Japanese public holiday. And then it goes on to the summer holidays as well. And Obon Week, more holidays. It does vary from region to region, so just check on where you're going. So this is the boring, geeky bit, but I highly recommend it because it will make planning the rest of your trip so much easier. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just start off with a blank spreadsheet or a piece of paper or whatever you've got to work with. write down for each day where you will be staying that evening. You can then use that to work out what travelling you need to do between places, what you want to do on each day, and because going to Japan can be expensive, how much you expect to spend so that you can budget. Booking flights. So there are 3 major international airports in Japan. So the first 2 serve Tokyo, that is Narita International and Haneda International. And further down south in the country is Kansai International by Osaka. You'll probably find that most flights take you into Tokyo, but there are some flights, if you pick ones that change, that can take you into Osaka. So booking flights, fairly common sense things, using a price comparison site. There's lots of them out there, Skyscanner, sites like that, to find the best deals. It's best to book as far in advance as possible if you can, just because it will make the flights so much cheaper. Prices of flights do vary. At the moment, you're looking at around about £550 per person if you're changing halfway, and direct flights are from about £650 roughly. The good news is that that's the most expensive bit of going to Japan. All the other costs aren't actually that much different to travelling around in the UK. It's cheaper to fly on some days of the week than other days. You'll tend to find it's kind of like Tuesday, Wednesdays tend to be the cheaper flights. And then as you get into the weekend, it gets more expensive. If you are flying indirect and you're making a change somewhere, make sure when you're booking that the airline's giving you enough time to change. It seems to be quite popular for airlines to give people 50 minutes to change now. From experience, you'd literally be running from one plane to the next. Not a good idea. And when you're picking an airline, just look up a few reviews. There's not too much difference between different airlines and the quality of the food and comfort, but there are subtle differences, as in JAL are better than Air France. Booking hotels. So once you've got your flights booked, you probably want to hop onto your hotels pretty quickly as well. Again, there's price comparison sites that you can use. Just have a look at hotels.com, things like that. Hotels don't actually have to be that expensive. We've managed to stay in hotels as cheap as about £45. They tend to be what are called business hotels. I better not go too much onto types of hotels because I've got that on the next couple of slides. But kind of average cost for a hotel, you're probably looking for about £60–70 per night if you can't find anything cheaper. Obviously, you can stay in much more expensive accommodation, but you don't really need to. You can check breakfast is included when you're booking. It's a nice to have, but it's not essential because it's fairly easy to find places to eat out and convenience stores to get food from if you need to. It's a bit easier with hotels in terms of cancellation policies. Airlines are pretty horrible on that kind of thing. Hotels, not so bad. So you can actually add a bit of flexibility in if you want. One really important tip is think about how you are going to get to that hotel. It's useful to pick a hotel that's close to a railway station. I'm going to go on railways a bit, but it's a really useful thing to have. And actually you'll find that a lot of hotels are clustered around railway stations anyway. And it's pretty easy as well to look at reviews for hotels. Word of warning, bad reviews are not necessarily bad, good reviews are not necessarily good. Pick a few, have a read and see what people are actually saying about them. I've seen reviews where somebody's given it a 1 star because they didn't like the breakfast, despite everything else being good. So yeah, check. So there's different styles of accommodation that you can stay in. If you want to go for a more authentic, traditional experience, you can stay in types of places called ryokans or minishus, where typically you'll sleep on a futon on the floor. You'll be expected to wear slippers around that they'll provide you instead of your shoes. You'll probably find that I have communal baths as well. If you like your Western comforts, there's lots of Western style accommodation there. I said about the business hotels before, they're kind of mainly designed for business travellers, but actually for tourists they're pretty handy as well. Usually find they're actually better equipped than, say, your average travel lodge also. You usually have like a little freezer in the room and air conditioning units and toiletries supplied in the bathrooms. The one thing I would say is that they are typically small compared to the UK. So just basically, you're in Japan, make the most of your time whilst you're out there. Don't spend too much time in the hotel room, and then you won't notice that it's so small. And if you really want a unique experience, there are other kinds of places to suit you. So this is the Robot Cafe in Kyushu. That's served entirely by robots, not just dinosaurs. It's not Dinosaur Hotel, but that probably would be amusing. There's capsule hotels. I've never stayed in a capsule hotel. For those of you who don't know, you probably all do know, but you just get a tiny little pod to sleep in. Yeah, you don't really need to do that. Lots of hotels with themed rooms as well, model railway sets, Godzilla's punching through the walls. You can find those if you want to find them. So, planning travel. So, when you get to Japan, you're obviously going to want to travel around. It's a really good idea to actually work out how you're going to get around before you get there. So I'm going to do a nice big promotional exercise for the Japan Rail Pass. This thing is amazing. We've used it on pretty much every trip. What it is you pay a lump sum up front and you get a pass which you can use on pretty much all Japan railway lines, including the Shinkansen, the bullet train, for 7, 14 or 21 days, depending on how much you're paying for. It's just so handy because you can just go straight through. You can get onto most trains unless you have to book. It will just make your life so much easier. And of course, you can change your travel plans whilst you're out there or go to different places. So it's really useful to have, and it's a massive discount on what it would normally cost to travel. The main thing I would say is that if you're only going for a few days and you're not really travelling around too much, then maybe you'd want to look at a different deal. But in most cases, you probably want to spend at least a week, if not more, out there. Do check exceptions on the Japan Rail Pass website before you go. Not everything is covered. Most things are, but some of the very fastest Shinkansens aren't. You've got to buy this before you go out to Japan. You can't actually buy it in Japan. So you've got to go to an authorised UK travel agent. There's a list of those on the Japan Rail Pass website. And what they'll do is they'll send you a voucher in the post. You then take that voucher with you to Japan and exchange it. Once you've bought the voucher, you can actually use it any time within 6 months. If you want that flexibility. So this is a really, really, really useful website for planning not just train travel, but actually any form of travel, because it also covers buses and flights, internal flights as well. It's called Hyperdia, and it's a little bit like the National Rail website. You type in where you want to go to, you type in where you're going from, the time you expect to travel, and it will come up with big list of services that you can use. It's really useful because it will show you things like the actual changes that you need to make and the train numbers that you need to get on and whether it's a local or a rapid and how much it's going to cost. So really, really, really useful planning tool. There are lots of other ways to get around Japan as well. Buses, trams, ferries, taxis, bicycles. I'm not going to go into detail on any of those, mainly because I don't have too much experience with them. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. Money. I say money. You're going to need this when you go out there. So at the moment, the exchange rate is about 130 to 135 yen to the pound. Something to do with a referendum on exiting the EU had a bit of an impact on that. But it does vary, so it will probably be different when you're looking to go out there. Like with everything, there is a comparison site for travel money. Something to do with Money Saving Expert. Really useful, and some of the top results it returns are post only, and that might be a bit nervous for some people, but we've used those a few times and they've all been fine, so don't worry about those. Really important thing to note is that Japan has a very strong cash culture. Notes and coins are much more prevalent than actually using cards than in the UK. So I would recommend taking out as much as you expect to spend in cash when you go out there. It's not impossible to get money whilst you're out there or to use your credit card, but you'll typically find that it will cause you more problems than benefits. As I say at the bottom there are ATMs that you can use, but they're not that foreigner friendly. Branches of Citibank and machines in the Lawson's convenience stores do act as ATMs, but I've only used Citibank. It was a bit of an awkward experience. Tried to use Lawson's and my bank blocked my card. So yeah, learn from my experience, please. Right, I'm going to cover some boring bits now. Visa waiver. So it's actually really easy to go to Japan. We're part of, the UK is part of what's called a visa waiver program. So that means that we can just literally hop on a plane, go to Japan, and as long as we're a tourist, and we're going to be staying out there for no longer than 90 days to begin with, you can just literally do that. Fill in a couple of forms when you go there, go through immigration, no problem. It's pretty all-encompassing, but just check to make sure that you cover all the conditions for that visa waiver. You're most likely to come unstuck if you're planning to study out there, like university study, or if you're actually going to do some kind of paid work out there. You will still need to go through immigration and customs when you get to Japan. I'll cover that in a bit when I go through all the stuff about what to do when you're in Japan. Travel insurance. This is important. Don't skip this. It might seem like a waste of money, but you never know when you will need this. And some travel insurance companies will actually help you out. You can phone them up whilst you're out there and they can help you. So that's worthwhile looking for as well. If any of you've got that free travel insurance that you get with your bank account, as part of their kind of marketing schemes, just check your terms and conditions for that, because it doesn't necessarily cover all of the world. Also, if you've got any medical conditions or you've been to the doctors recently, make sure to phone up that free travel insurance company and let them know about it. Otherwise, you could invalidate your insurance. Health and medicine. Japan's a pretty safe country to go to. There's not too much for tourists to worry about, unless you're going hiking in jungles. But get your vaccinations done beforehand. Just make sure you're fine. Your routine vaccinations at your doctor's. This is a fun bit, right? Packing and luggage. I say fun. Most of you are probably like, you sick person. How dare you enjoy packing? check your flight allowance before you go. It's usually pretty generous. You'll probably struggle to use up all of, it's about an average of 20 kilograms or so, depending on who you fly with. But just check before you go, just to save paying anything extra when you get to the airport. Put together a checklist of things to take with you. There's loads of checklists online that you can look at. It's just really handy, especially if you've got a memory like me and you always leave something at home. If you are going out for Japan for a while, say 2 or 3 weeks or so, you don't necessarily have to worry about packing clothes for every day. You can find hotels with washing machines, tumble dryers pretty easily. And there's also laundriettes out there. They work on a coin-based system. They're pretty cheap, like a couple of quid. And we've used them, and it's actually been really helpful. And if for whatever reason you're planning a really short trip, I'm not sure why you would only want a short trip when there's so much to do out there. You may not even need to take whole luggage. You might just be able to get away with a really big cabin bag. Electronics. So geeky stuff, that is a Japanese plug. It's got 2 flat pins. Japanese voltage is different to our voltage. It's 100 volts, whereas we have 240 volts. The good thing is, most electronics companies design their chargers to be compatible with multiple voltages. The easiest way to check is just to get your charger, look at the label on it, and if it says 100-230 volts on it, then it will work with both, and you won't need an adapter. You will actually need, of course, the travel adapter plug thing to plug in your UK plugs into it. Unless you're geeky like me and buy Japanese leads, just to save a little bit of space in packing. There's also a bit on there about mobile coverage. So mobile coverage is pretty wide out in Japan, but check with your phone company just to see what kind of cost you might be paying and who you might be partnered with out there. There are other options for phoning whilst you're out there. You can actually rent a phone, which sounds a bit weird, but you can do. Hotels have phones as well that you can use. Right, so picture in your mind's eye, you're going to the airport, all the boring stuff is out of the way, the exciting bit of actually going to Japan is happening. You've got to get to the airport, that's the first thing you've got to do. Just make sure you leave enough time to get there, make sure you know how you're going to get there. I recommend arriving about 3 hours before you actually need to fly. You don't know what's going to happen with trains and motorways in the UK. So you can often check into your flight online these days. You don't have to check in when you get to the airport.
Don't do that while you're still on the train, because the train may get delayed, late, and then they all blame the guard.
Yes, absolutely valid. I've been on enough trains in the UK and...
Wait until you're at the airport until you check in.
Even if you do check in online, you still need to drop your bags at the airport. You usually go to similar kind of desks. Sometimes they're different, sometimes they're the same. As with everything, check with your airline just to make sure. It's better to know and be prepared. If you've got a connecting flight and you're changing, again, check with the airline. Different airports have different maps and subtly different ways of changing flights. It's just good to know in advance. So just to set some expectations for those of you who haven't travelled, direct flights take about 12 to 13 hours. It's a long time on a plane. Get up, stretch your legs, just wander around. You might look like a loon, but it'll make yourself feel a lot more comfortable. If you're like me and you struggle to sleep when you're on the move, get a neck pillow, get some earplugs, get an eye mask, get some lavender tea if you've got any lavender tea. Just do everything you can, because it's really hard to sleep on planes. Right, so when you're on a plane, the attendants should come round and give you two very scary looking forms. So this is the immigration form. It's helpful to know some of the details of your trip because you'll need to fill them in on this form. So I'd recommend making a note of the first hotel that you're going to stay at because they'll want the name and the address of it. So make sure you've got that. A couple of other quirks as well. There's two sections that say port of embarkation and port of disembarkation. That's the complex way of saying the airport where you got on at and the airport where you're getting off at. And that's a customs form. It's pretty self-explanatory when you see it. You probably won't need to worry about it. You're probably not taking £10 million with you or anything dodgy. I hope you're not taking anything dodgy. So you can fill those out on the plane. If they don't turn up on the plane, you'll be able to fill them out at the airport. So you'll be greeted by immigration and customs. So this is the kind of the boring phase of entry to Japan. So you simply follow everybody else or follow the signs to immigration control. Once you've queued up and got to the counter, they will check your form, they will take your fingerprints, and they will take a photo of you. And once they've done that, it just takes a couple of minutes, and then you're through. So the next step is to pick up your luggage, and then you're ready to go through customs. Again, it's a pretty easy process. You just hand the customs officer at the counter your form. They may ask you a couple of questions, may check quickly inside your bags, but I've never had to take everything out of my bag, so it's not too much to worry about. So once you've cleared that, you are in Japan, bona fide certified. So I'm going to cover a little bit about traveling in Japan now. So you've arrived at the airport, you're going to want to get somewhere. So if you've got that Japan Rail Pass that I said about earlier, now might be a good time to actually activate it. So you take it to the Travel Service Centre, should be signposted. If not, check online before you go. You can find a little map to say where you find the travel service centres in the airports. You basically pop along, hand them your little pass voucher, show them your passport to prove that you're not a Japanese national, and they'll issue you your JR pass. So that's when your time starts, when you hand in that voucher. So you only really need to do that if you're going to travel on a Japan Railways train. There are actually multiple railway operators in Japan. So from Narita, there's two services. There's the Narita Express, which is Japan Railways, and there's the Keisai Skyliner, which isn't. So obviously, you may want to exchange your JR pass to travel on the Narita Express, but obviously not on the Keisai Skyliner. Word of note with those two trains, they are reserved seating only, so you will need to go to the counter, travel service counter, and book your seats. If you're exchanging your JR pass, they'll actually ask you if you want to book any seats there and then, and they'll tell you what services are available. So they are pretty helpful like that. Quick note on Haneda. The Tokyo monorail is covered by the Japan Rail Pass, even though it's not a Japan Railways route. And from Osaka, there's Japan Railways trains, and there's Nankai Railways, which are not Japan Railways. When you get there, they do have different station entrances. They're very close together, but just make sure you go through the right one. So I'm going to concentrate a little bit on Tokyo and not too much outside here. But obviously there are trains that take you almost everywhere in Japan. So Tokyo's got a really complex mix of railways, both overground and underground, Japan Railways and non-Japan Railways. If you haven't taken up the option of having a Japan Rail Pass, You can get a card called the Suica, which is like the London Oyster card, a prepaid card. You can top it up and you just whiz through ticket gates with it. Can be really handy. And you can also get deals with that with other forms of transport. So if you're taking the Narita Express to get to Tokyo, but you're not using a Japan Rail Pass, you can actually get like a combo deal that gives you a small discount. You probably need to use the railway and subway maps. It can be pretty complex, but there are maps at pretty much all the stations. Just check because at the bigger stations there's usually an English sign. You may have to hunt for it. At the smaller stations they may be in Japanese only. So if you have got any critical travel you're making to get to hotels, that kind of thing, just make a note of the railway stations that you've planned in Japanese, or take a photo of it just so you've got something to refer to. So if you're not using Japan Rail Pass, you probably need to use a ticket vending machine. Look for the languages button or the English button on them. It'll make it a little easier. A typical system is you look on the map at the station that you're at, you look at where you want to go to, there's a number which is the price of the ticket, put your money in, get your ticket, and you're on your way. If you have a problem, you can press the emergency assistance button, and sometimes somebody will pop out of the machine. I'm not joking. Just a word of note, tickets are usually one way. I haven't really seen many return tickets in Japan. So just remember that when you're traveling around. If you can't book from a machine, or you're planning travel further afield than Tokyo, it's a good idea to visit the ticket office at one of the big stations. It's called a Midori no Guchi, and it's got a nice green sign in it. It'll be really helpful to the staff there if you've got like a little printout or a little note to say which train you want to catch, just to save any language difficulties that may or may not occur. If you're travelling around and for whatever reason you need to get off of a station early, or you've missed a station, there are things called fare adjustment machines. So before you exit the station, you can put your ticket in, get it adjusted, pay the difference, and get a new ticket, and then you can escape the station. A little bit easier than the UK. So just very quickly, watch out for different kinds of trains, especially when they're on the same routes. There's local trains that stop at every station. There's rapids and rapid expresses that stop at less. There is a kind of like a first class system in Japan called green class. If you do want to travel on that, you will need to pay separately when you book your tickets at the ticket counter. Also, a lot of trains have non-reserved seating, but do watch out because some trains have carriages that are only reserved seating, and some trains are even reserved only. If you're using that website I said earlier, Hyperdia, it will tell you what's available on it, so it's really helpful. Right, it's enough about trains. Hotels. So it's useful to have your reservation printed out when you arrive at the hotel, just to make sure it goes smoothly. They will need to take a copy of your passport. They are required by Japanese law to do this. It's a bit of a pain, but just comply with them. Key systems vary. Sometimes you get the little cards put into your door. Sometimes you'll actually get a key with a big plastic stick or a big wooden stick. I've usually found that where they give you a key and a stick, you have to hand it into reception when you leave the hotel and pick it up when you come back. They may be upset with you if you take it out with you. So just note that. Okay, so I haven't really covered much about actually what to see out there. So I'm just going to do like a little spin through here. So some of my recommendations are visiting Shibuya, Harajuku, Yoyogi Park and the Meiji Jingu Shrine. So that's quite a bit to fit on one slide. The reason I've done that is because they're actually in fairly close proximity to each other. So Shibuya is just a little bit down from Harajuku, and Harajuku is right next door to Yoyogi Park and the Meiji Jingu Shrine. It's a really good area of Tokyo to see the latest fashions, both kind of more mainstream in Shibuya and less mainstream in Harajuku. Yogi Park is a really big park that's just really nice to walk around, and sometimes you'll see people performing and that kind of thing. And then the Meiji Jingu Shrine is in Yogi Park as well. So I highly recommend it. Then there's Asakusa, which is kind of like a bit more like Old Town Tokyo, and the Sasoji Temple there. So really useful place to get souvenirs because the route to the temple is lined with souvenir shops. But it's a pretty impressive temple there as well. If you want to see Japan from a height, there's a few different places you can go to. The Tokyo Skytree is the most up-to-date edition, something like 645 meters that you actually go up to. So I believe it's the second tallest point you can go in a structure in the world. So really, really impressive view that you can get from up there. Of course, there's the Tokyo Tower as well, which is still impressive and is a different area of Tokyo. If you're traveling on a budget, then you can go to the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Office. Sounds really boring, but they do have a free observation platform that you can actually go to, and it's really worthwhile checking out. It also gives you a view across to Yoyogi Park. So it's kind of fun to go there and then go up and kind of see it from a different point. Okay, we're otaku. So highly recommend visiting Akihabara and Nakano Broadway to get in some otaku shopping. Depending on how much money you've got to spend, I would recommend taking a whole day just to do this because there are so many shops that you can go into and search and hunt around in. It is a truly amazing experience. Once you've been there, the dealer's room and the bring and buy will just seem rubbish. But I do recommend taking out quite a bit of money so that you can do that, just because there's so much stuff. So you're not only stuck to being in Tokyo as well, if you're staying in Tokyo, there's a couple of really easy day trips that you can do out as well. So Hakone is kind of near Mount Fuji, and you can get some impressive views on it. There's like a sightseeing pass that you can do. So you travel out there on the train, and then you go through a system of like cable cars and funicular railways and ships and travel around the area. Really nice, really scenic. Makes for a good day out. Another place that is really close to my heart because I just love it. A little island called Eneshima that juts off from the town of Eneshima. Again, it's really quick to get to from Tokyo. It's really nice to walk around. It's by the sea. It's just got such a different feeling to Tokyo that it's just really good. Last year I did a presentation on having an otaku holiday. I don't know how many of you were at Amechibi this year. If you weren't, that's a whole hour spiel on otaku things that you can do, attractions, events, pilgrimages to places featured in anime. There's tons of stuff in there for having an otaku-themed holiday. So that's on YouTube. Just literally search for "Have Yourself a Very Otaku Holiday," and you can find that. Eating out there, you're obviously going to want to eat. You obviously want to try some Japanese food. Good news is if you're not keen on fish and that kind of stuff, Western food's pretty easily accessible out there as well. Sometimes it might be heavily interpreted, but still pretty damn tasty. So good places to hunt for restaurants are near stations and also in kind of shopping centres. They'll usually have restaurant-themed floors that you can go to and just pick out usually pretty good prices. What I would recommend is that you have your main meal at lunchtime. It's pretty common for restaurants to offer cheaper meals at lunchtime than in the evenings. It also tends to be a lot busier in the evenings. So it's just a good way of saving money and freeing up your evening a bit. Quick word on the system. It's a pretty common system out there to go into the restaurant, be seated. Every time you order something, they'll give you a little slip of paper, which is kind of like your receipt. When you're finished, you don't necessarily have to call for attention. Just get up, go to the exit. There'll be a till there, and somebody will take your money there. I wish more places in the UK were that easy to exit. But you don't have to eat like a king at restaurants and sushi bars and that. Fast food is pretty easy to find out there as well, both Western style, McDonald's, what's the one with the Colonel? Kentucky Fried Chicken, Kentucky Fried Creatures. But Japan also has their own branches of fast food as well, Lotteria, Moss Burger, so you can just look out for those. They're pretty easy to find. Convenience store food is fine as well. They're pretty well stocked up, they're pretty fresh, and you can get all kinds of things in there. So really good. Just want to make a note on vegetarian food. So if any of you are vegetarian, you probably want to do your research before you go out there. Because even a lot of the dishes that seem like they'd be vegetarian friendly might not be, because they'll have fish extracts and animal extracts in the dressings that they use for food, soy sauce and stuff like that. Also, if you've got any allergies, really useful to look up what it is in Japanese before you go, put it on a card, and then you can show it to the people that are serving you. I think awareness of vegetarian food and allergies is kind of not so good as it is in the UK, as it is out in Japan. So it's definitely worthwhile covering your bases and checking and making sure. Staying in touch. You'll find most hotels do have internet connectivity, whether it's a communal computer, whether it's Wi-Fi. I've actually seen it pretty common to have a network socket in the room, a LAN cable. So I use like one of these little mobile router things. So I plug in the network cable in, plug in the other end to the little router, and it generates your own Wi-Fi network for you. So that's been really useful. And you can find free Wi-Fi out and about as well, typically in restaurants, fast food chains. A little bit of basic etiquette will go a long way to making your presence friendly in Japan. So the key thing, bowing. You don't have to bow to say thank you or show gratitude, but you'll probably find yourself doing it anyway, just because you will have so many people doing that to you when you're buying stuff from them. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it in return. Taking off your shoes. Most places you go to, you won't need to. If you're going into a more traditional restaurant or more traditional hotel, or even to somebody's personal residence, you will usually be required to take off your shoes, and you'll be provided with slippers to put on. In those kind of places, you may even have an additional set of slippers to go to the bathroom in. So it's a bit of a crazy exercise. Chopsticks, you don't really need to mess around with them. Don't stab people with them. Don't stab rice with them. Don't leave them stuck in rice. Just basic. You wouldn't do that with your knife and fork. I hope you wouldn't do that with your knife and fork. But it is acceptable to use the other end of the chopsticks that you're not eating with to pick out food from communal pots. So just helps save a bit of awkwardness. Tipping. tipping is almost unheard of in Japan, and in fact it could be considered impolite to try and force a tip on someone. So the cost of the service is included in the price you pay in restaurants, so they're usually happy with that. Sometimes in places it's usually pretty quiet. You don't need to go around shouting. You know, it's a typical British thing, isn't it? When somebody doesn't understand you, you shout louder. You don't need to do that in Japan. Also, watch out for train carriages. It's usually considered impolite to talk on your phone. You probably wouldn't need to talk on your phone whilst you're travelling on a train, but it can be considered impolite. Blowing your nose. This is a bit of an awkward one. It's kind of considered impolite to get a big tissue out of your pocket and do a massive honk in the middle of the street in Japan. If you observe Japanese people, you usually find that they either sniff it back in, or they'll wear the face masks to try and conceal it, or the easiest thing is just to go find a quiet corner and just do it quietly. Then finally, speaking with people. Japanese do learn English at school. However, you'll find a lot of people are very reluctant to actually use Japanese. So you may end up needing to do a combination of simple English phrases and pointing your hands, that kind of thing. So language, we'll cover some really, really simple bits. The good news is that you don't have to be an expert in Japanese. You don't even have to be a novice in the Japanese language to travel around, especially if you're traveling around in Tokyo. There's so much English language signs that it's pretty easy to get around. It's useful to learn a few phrases, if only to be polite whilst you're out there. So there's a few here. By the way, don't bring me up on my pronunciation. I'm not any good at languages. So thank you is arigatou gozaimasu. If you want it a little bit more informal, you can drop the gozaimasu bit and just say arigato. You can say, excuse me, sumimasen. So that's if you want attention, or as kind of an informal way, if you bump into somebody on the street or they bump into you, you can just say sumimasen. If you do actually want to say sorry, i.e. you've messed up or you feel really apologetic, you would say gomen nasai. Slightly more useful perhaps, two phrases. I've kind of split them apart on the slide. Do you speak English? Eigo ga hanashimasu ka? And then a variation upon that, do you understand English? Eigo ga wakarimasu ka? So you're probably more likely to get more people say yes to the latter, do you understand, rather than the do you speak. Just pick up on the context and decide which of those is appropriate. My favourite one is, I want to buy something that is in a cabinet. Most precisely, I want to buy an anime figure that is in a cabinet. So you can get away with just saying, showkeisu onegai shimasu. Literal translation is showcase, please. They'll get what you want to do. They'll follow you to the showcase and unlock it. And you just point out what you want. If you're feeling brave, you might try saying the name of your character in Japanese and try and improve them, impress them. One tip that I've kind of found really useful, if you are doing a bit of Japanese learning and you're learning the katakana characters, really, really useful to learn those, because a lot of the time when you actually read out what they're saying, they are English words or variations on English words that are familiar, so that can actually help you get around a little bit. Or you can do a really simple thing. You can save a lot of the hassle with all that planning and go on the tour. That's what I did for my first 2 trips for Japan. Was really, really good exercise. I just went on my own as part of the tour group. Fantastic chance to meet like-minded people. Fantastic way of just finding out about Japan, exploring Japan without a lot of the hassle of planning. So, please go and have an amazing trip. I would absolutely love all of you to start planning, to get out there and experience it for yourselves, because it's one thing coming to a panel like this, with a guy like me speaking about it, going, it's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing. It's a whole different thing when you're actually out there experiencing it. It is truly fantastic. So, I hope you've enjoyed, or at least feel informed by this presentation.